Commissioner, for that comments. We are about to open our executive meeting for January, and I am pulling up my calendar or my agenda real quick. We're going to start with a member update and introduction. My name is Chris McAllister. I am currently the chair of the Poverty and Homelessness Board. I have the lived experience seat, meaning that I have lived experience as a homeless person in this community. And I would like to pass on to Vice Chair Farr.
Thank you, Chair McAllister. My name is Pat Farr, Board of Lane County Commissioners. I'm currently serving as the chair mentioned as one of the co-vice chairs with an emphasis on poverty. And I'll pass it along to the other co-vice chair, Brittany Quick-Warner.
Thank you, Brittany Quick-Warner. I am the president and CEO of the Eugene Chamber and serving in the business representative seat and co-chair for homelessness. Thanks. And do I pass it to someone? I'll pass it to Mayor.
Yeah, there we go.
Sorry, I think you said you were going to pass it to me, Mayor Venice, Mayor of Eugene, and I also sit on the Shelter Stakeholder Committee. And I will pass it to, let's see, I'll pass it to Lori Trieger. How's that?
Hello, Lori Trieger, Lane County Commissioner. This is an executive committee meeting, is that right? Not the full PHB. Yeah, so I'm mostly just listening in today, and I will pass it over to Kate Budd.
Thank you, and I'm Kate Budd. I'm the housing manager with Human Services and Housing for Lane County, and I will pass it to Danielle Batista.
Hi, Danielle Bautista. I work for Lane County Human Services Division, and I will pass it off to Erin Fifield.
Erin Fifield, City of Springfield, staff. I'm unclear who to pass it next to, so I'll just let someone else call it.
Hey, Chris, are we doing full board intros or just executive committee?
We're just doing an executive. Mayor Van Gordon is running late, but he and Matthias are the remaining members of our executive committee. So is Matthias here?
Yes, I'm here. I'm Matthias, youth representative.
Excellent. Well, thank you everybody for being here and part of this this meeting. Let's go to the next agenda item. I am having a couple technical difficulties, so if I slip out, I'm going to ask that Commissioner Farr check in if I feel not if I'm not being responsive. But we currently have the consent agenda. So do we have a motion to approve the minutes from November 18th, 2021, and to accept the statement of revenue and expenditures?
Brittany, so moved.
Is there a second?
I will second.
Excellent. So moved and seconded. All in favor, please signify by saying aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
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 Any opposed, signify by saying nay. Hearing none, motion passes. Let's move on forward to the point in time methodology by Amanda Borda.
Thanks, Chris. Chair, could I just jump in for 1 second?
Oh, yes. Sorry, Amanda. Yes, Mayor.
I apologize. I was trying to get it in somewhere in the consent calendar that, you know, again, we have just voted on a financial oversight thing without any sort of discussion or review. And I just want to remind this committee that we have a responsibility to do that financial oversight, but we don't get any kind of orientation to it at all or discussion of it. So just wanting to make that point again. We passed it again, but I actually would like it to be, I'd like to pull that. I should have jumped faster, pull it from the consent so staff could speak to it a little bit.
Yes, and Madam Mayor, I hear you, and I want you to know that we had talked about having at our general meeting an overview of our financials, and so I want to make sure that we do have a breakdown of everything moving forward. And you are correct. If we want to go in that deeper, I will always open that. And so if you'd like, as a standing order, I will separate the request for the agenda so we can actually address the revenues as a separate point item, if that's. Okay.
Yeah, I
Thank
would
you, ma'am.
support that too.
That would be great. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Brittany. Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much. And back to our regularly scheduled program. Amanda, you have the floor. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thanks, Chris. And I'm actually passing that over to Lisa Stewart to present on that item. Lisa, did you need to share your screen?
No, I don't. Okay. I think in just probably this morning, you have received the unsheltered homeless count methodology. It does look a lot like the one that you received last year that you approved. We worked with HUD really closely for this January count to get the methodology approved. We had hoped to use last year's methodology, which was based heavily on our homeless by name list. We did get that approved again with 2 stipulations. One is that when we do the adjacent count, when we do an actual count, which we will use to confirm our results and make sure we didn't miss anyone who was not connected with services and from providers in our homeless management information system, that we are doing using street outreach teams that are coordinated by James Ewell, and he will be working with those teams to do a count, looking for pockets throughout our geographic region of people who may not have engaged in any of the services that are tracked in our homeless management information system. Those, we did that last year. We did collect only 45 surveys last year, and all of them, it did turn out, were represented in the data already. We already knew of those folks, but it's definitely a worthwhile effort to try to identify those pockets of people who, for whatever reason, are not engaged. I just think it's great that we're able to do that. So we'll be using the Counting Us app, which we used in 2020, and we'll be collecting a really simple survey. We're not, there's no local questions. It should be a pretty easy move. And then we'll verify whether those folks were in our HMIS system. If they're duplicates, we will merge those records. If not, we'll include them in our unsheltered count. The other stipulation is that HUD would like us to narrow our window that we use to identify active in our system. Our homeless by name list looks at a month and says, in this month, these people experienced homelessness in Lane County. But what HUD has asked us to do is narrow that window to 14 days. So at the end of January, well, right now, we'll look at a 14-day window up to the day after the count and include folks who have been engaged with services as and count them. I ran an experiment with that. It is almost the same exact number as the month. It's also the same, almost exact if we use 7 days or 5 days. So that it does pencil out for us. It won't be a big jump or some outlier in our trending data for the point in time count. That is pretty much the total. I have details of what is the HBNL and how we worked with the HUD to get this approved. But if you have questions, I'd like to answer them and make sure that we're all on board before you vote to approve.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Members of the committee, are there any questions that jump out? I do have a couple, but I want to hold space first for other folks.
Yeah, Chris, I have a couple too.
Oh, yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
So just kind of wrapping my head around this, since I wasn't on the committee last year when we did this part of it. Generally speaking, do we have a sense of how many entities in our community are working with homeless individuals and not putting their data into our HMIS system or homeless by name list. So because they aren't required to, based on not getting funding from us, et cetera, do we know, like, have we done an analysis to try to figure out how many other ways people are not getting into the system?
No, it's a good question. We offer the system at no cost to the provider. So we like to reach out whenever there's a new provider that works mainly with unhoused folks. Mm-hmm. And the only ones that I'm aware of, and other HSD staff might be aware of different ones, are some of the food pantries that just do not have the capacity, literal bandwidth to participate in the system. So those are the ones, but their focus is not homelessness. Their focus is folks who need food assistance. And so most of the people that they serve are housed. But as far as homeless projects, I am not really sure of ones that are not in the system or not engaged to be in the system soon.
Okay, that's helpful. There's just like, words in the community about like, yeah, there's people who don't use the system, that we aren't capturing those folks. Mm-hmm. And I just didn't know if we have ever tried to quantify that. So I guess my question about the targeted survey. So historically, our point in time count was done with like a bunch of volunteers in theory. And we know that there's all kinds of ineffectiveness of like year over year and comparability depending on the number of volunteers we had and all of that. So is this trying to take like a snapshot of folks to then just test it against the homeless by name list? Or is the idea that we are still trying to do a full point in time count, but just with our outreach workers?
No, it is not a full point in time count. It is a targeted count looking at pockets or areas where the people who have informed us of them, like law enforcement, the Forest Service, Public Works, people who work in those regions, feel there might be people staying there who have not engaged in the regular system of services that would be represented in our homeless management information system. We do this we've actually done this for 3 years now, where we've leaned heavily on our data, and we have implemented a survey just to catch folks who might not be engaged. We have yet to discover pockets of people who aren't engaged. They have all been engaged in one way or another in our system. And I believe that's because our system has, like today, over 210 active projects in it. So there are a lot of doors to walk in to have that record created. And excellent. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yes, thank you very much for that. I am looking to see, are there members of the committee that would like to ask more questions? Yes, Commissioner.
Thanks, Chris. And just a kind of a follow-up on what Brittany was just asking. I've been following the homeless point in time count for a lot of years, and Lisa, I personally have historically tried to use it more as a comparison as opposed to an absolute number. And the methodology has changed a little bit, but really, am I correct in not really considering it to be a true number, but more or less just a comparison and just a gauge of where we are in terms of increase in homelessness or decrease, which hasn't occurred yet?
I think you're right. It used to be before we had before 2019, and we implemented the homeless by name list. It used to be our way of seeing a trend. So what we would know is we were able to count people who we were able to count and supplement those data with HMIS data. We've done that for years, but it's a point in time. It's one night. It depends on the volunteers and all that kind of stuff, but it was the tool we had. And it was something that we could compare with other communities, which we did learn throughout time was really not very reliable, because we might approach the survey in a different manner than another community. And so we're really looking at apples and oranges, because there is a lot of flexibility on what HUD allows and considers a survey. So as far as for our county and understanding trends, it was very useful. But now that we have the homeless by name list, which is which is, I mean, we look at that every month now, looking at the prior month and looking at what the trends are there. That's, for me, way more inclusive. But having this moment on the point in time count to go out into the community with street outreach workers who are professional, they know what they're looking for. They know how to interact with people. If there are missing pockets of people, they'll find them. So this should be a really interesting year. This should inform us more than we've had in the past.
And thanks for that continuation and clarification. You know, it's really important that we all understand, at least in one fashion or another, what the homeless count point in time count can do and doesn't do. You know, it's not a panacea. It doesn't answer everything, but it does give us some tools to move forward with the targeting services. And one element is that we do sometimes find people who need services who have not received services before. We also find people who are completely unwilling to talk about who they are, where they've been, what they need, etc. So it's flawed in that respect. And as you pointed out, Lisa, different localities do it differently. But the question is, do we receive any level of funding based on the homeless point in time count? Does HUD allocate money based on that, or is this just for their own internal consumption?
If Amanda is able to, I prefer that she address that question, because now we're getting into the bigger picture.
And no need for a lengthy response to this, because I don't think we have that much time on this particular agenda. But the more we understand the homeless point in time, we've had people in the past who've taken that number and used it to make pretty broad sweeping statements. And it really, I don't believe it's good for making broad sweeping statements other than what we've just talked about. So Amanda, do we get money based on our count?
So the short answer is yes. The point in time count is something that is reviewed by Congress when they're determining funding formulas and determining how to allocate funding across the nation. It also comes into play as something that we're obviously required to do. And so through our COC application, we typically will receive some level of points towards our score for the COC competition based on conducting a point in time count each year. So in a couple of ways, it does impact our funding levels.
Thanks, Amanda. I love your analysis on that. And can we be assured that it's not possible to game the system? That is to say that other localities are gaming the system in order to receive a higher proportion of the spending that HUD has to offer?
It is based on a formula, so I don't think that is something that is of a concern. I think it's one of many things that HUD will look at when they're determining funding. It's not sort of the sole item that they would look at, but it impacts, it's sort of the one data source that they have consistently across the nation to look at a level of need, since every community sort of looks at that differently. Not every community has a homeless by name list at this point. Many do, but not all. So it's sort of the one consistent data piece that they look at when they're making those decisions.
And I will say the state of Oregon also looks at this information and also includes it in a formula. And I am working with the other continuum of care in Oregon to make sure that we are counting consistently across all of our areas. So we are not competing by changing methodology and kind of undercutting each other. So we are great conversations I'm having with my peers in the other counties and communities. So that will be, so they do publish out a point in time comparison in the state of Oregon for us to look at. That you'll probably see that in June. Those always come out so much later than we do the survey. But it should be, because we are more aligned, and also because I'm training these other communities on how to build a by name list in their own systems, and they're going to copy ours. We should have a lot more alignment as years go down the road here.
And that is important that we're doing it at the state level. And I know you're working hard on that, Lisa, but that is a flaw if we are being compared with other communities nationwide for the same pot of money, and they don't give us a standard formula to do the count on. It's a flawed system. And whether or not people are gaming it, people are using different systems to provide different information. Potentially, we're not getting our full allocation from HUD and other sources. But locally, here in Oregon, because Lane County's been leading the way in homeless by name list, and other counties are beginning to copy it, I think we're going to get some level of consistency at the state level at least.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. That'll make it much more relevant when we're looking at those numbers, at least in Oregon.
Exactly. Thank you, Lisa. And Chair McAllister, I'm going to mention this at this point in time. Sometime later in the meeting, maybe we can discuss it. A headline, anybody who happens to read what used to be our local newspaper, the Register Guard, may have seen the headline yesterday, The Fatal Impacts of Homelessness, the county silent on tracking homeless details. Let's talk about that later in this meeting if there is time. If not, please give me a call because that's a little bit misleading in the headline statement. Thank you.
I agree, sir, and thank you for that comment, and thank you, Lisa. Madam Mayor, please take the floor.
Yeah, thank you. And Commissioner, thanks for commenting on that headline. That was a terrible headline. And if you read the rest of the story, it had a very different slant. So I agree with you. It caught me off guard.
But I'm glad they cited Rep. Mary Wilde in that one.
I know. I know. The whole thing was just not quite right. So Lisa, I continue to be just sort of awed and amazed by the work you do and the thoroughness of your work. And so, I have no critique of this. And I think this conversation has been really interesting. And I think just being a little bit of a stickler for process today, it would be great if we would get this kind of information a little farther in advance of a meeting, just because at least at the city level, we have staff that are really involved in this and they might have opinions, and there wasn't really a turnaround time for them to sort of look at it, weigh in with me, so just a plea in the future that if something like this where we have to act on it, it would be nice at least to have it a couple of days in advance so that there is a little time for us to do due diligence.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We had some staffing changes and we did a little hit and miss communication, but it was all here and prepped and ready to go. So I'm sorry it was last minute out to the board.
Thank you, everybody, for this topic. I just going to throw out one comment and two questions, and then we'll move on to our next item. As a participant in the point in time count process for multiple years in a row, we've tried to do things differently, and so I'm very interested in the methodologies and how we do this. And Lisa has always been a champion for better data to better serve our purpose. And so I just want to, the comment is we've utilized this data in resolutions from the PHB to be able to try and get ahead of our problems that we are facing in this community. And so our thoughts were to utilize this as a way to say, how many beds do we need for the next winter, knowing how many people we're starting with the year, and to try and build and craft our strategic plans and our allocations towards meeting those basic needs as opportunities arise throughout the legislative sessions and throughout the funding calendar. And so I really hope that as we move forward, whatever methodology we pass, that we utilize this data in a meaningful way that helps educate and inform in real time what we're trying to do. So my question to Lisa is, and we don't have to deal with this before the vote, but can we find better ways to utilize this data in the existing funding systems? And two, are we meeting our own standards for data quality with this new methodology?
Oh, interesting. I would, and just because I'm in the data all the time, I would use the by name list to make any decisions on resource allocation, redirecting resources to different geographic areas of our county or different project types. It is more consistent, something that I would lean on much more heavily than this snapshot in time once a year data. And as far as data quality, that is always an uphill, Sisyphus, I think that's what we are, always trying to get better data quality and being faced with the realities of folks at the agencies who are short-staffed, who are doing so much work. And so we keep on trying to have that balance. I think that will be an endless challenge, but we're up for it. We all know the value in it, and so do the agencies. So we just need to keep on providing that support.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your information and your experience on this topic, Lisa. And I would like to see if there's enough here to be able to entertain a motion to approve this methodology.
I'll move to approve the methodology, Mayor Venus.
Thank you, Mayor. Can I get a second?
I'll second, Brittany.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Before we call the vote, is there any more discussion necessary to be able to feel comfortable with voting on this item? Seeing no hands raised, I'd like to call the vote. All in favor, please signify by saying aye or raising your hand. Aye.
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 Any opposed, signify by saying nay. Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you, Lisa. And thank you, team. So next on our agenda is the 2016-2021 Strategic Plan Summary. Ms. Kate Budd.
Sure, thank you, Chair. So many of you are well aware that there is a strategic plan for the PHB that ran from 2016 to 2021. And that at the beginning, I understand there was an opportunity to reflect on current progress at a regular cadence. And then I imagine due to COVID, that regular cadence didn't occur. And so for myself, someone who is coming newly into the community, one thing that I really wanted to understand is where are we regarding the PHB strategic plan? How are we doing? Have some of the status updates that are reflected in green, yellow, red, have those changed, and have we, made notable progress on this plan, especially when it came to an end in 2021, but will continue to help guide us until we have a new plan. So in your packet, you have a spreadsheet that has a number of different columns. You can see the overall goal from that strategic plan, the strategy under ABC, the description of what that particular goal was, and then the status, which is that red, green, yellow, which basically is like at green, like we're doing well, we've either achieved it or things are moving in the right direction in order to make it come to fruition. Yellow being, things have moved forward, but it may have been stalled in some way, or it may not actually be achieved at the same level that the plan had expected. And then red, and I'm not sure if there is a red, but if there were a red, it would have been that not only did we not achieve it, but that there was no progress made, no conversations kind of related to that goal, and nothing happened. So I'd like to draw your attention next to the notes on the current progress. That is actually from the previous update done maybe 2 years ago, possibly even later. And then the next column to the right, the notes on 2020-2021 progress, that is the update that we are presenting to you at this meeting. And it highlights the work that's been done or is upcoming in 2022. What I was really pleased about, again, as someone who's newly coming into the community, is that there's a lot of work that has happened. Not only since this plan was created, but in the last 2 years that this particular document may not have been updated. And so I wish to share this with you and thank the PSCs for their updates and for the PHB committees that may have had a chance to add progress as well. I think staying up to date on any plan is important, and we want to continue to reflect on where we are and what's going well and what are the friction points so that we can work together to address them. So I'll pause here and see if there are just any reactions to the update or any questions regarding the notes to progress.
Are there any questions, folks? I want to personally say thank you. Oh, yes, Commissioner Farr, 1 second. I want to say to Kate, thank you for utilizing this metric still. When we did the live matrix update and it was red across the board, when we just started knowing that we were changing it, and there's a lot more yellow and greens, and it'd be really cool to see that matrix for the whole entire strategic plan as opposed to the parts that were called out in our presentation. I hope we continue to use this matrix, and thank you for that. So we have Commissioner Farr followed by Mayor Venice, and then Brittany.
Well, Chair McAllister, I'm glad you went first because you covered the point I was going to make initially. So the only other thing I'll say is to welcome Kate and the experience that you bring. I love what you said. I was pleased to see that a lot of work has been done on the plan since the last update. And that really is what's lacking here is continual update. And you've already injected vigor into that. And I appreciate that. Not to say the plan doesn't need to be changed, but it doesn't need to be scrapped by any stretch of the imagination, because we are working on the plan. We're moving forward on it. And while it has gaps because things are very dynamic on the homelessness front, we're making progress. And Kate, for those of you all who haven't met Kate personally yet, I had a chance to meet with Kate, and I believe Brittany Quick-Warner, you've met with Kate, haven't you? And Mayor Venice, I believe you've met with Kate, perhaps. But Kate comes from Clark County in Washington. Clark County is not unlike Lane County in one respect, a very huge city in the county that really is an engine for the entire county. Now, Clark County's Washington's different to Oregon, but Kate, the experience that you bring in unifying the plans between the city and the county and nonprofits in the city and the county really is going to be valuable for us here in Lane County. I really welcome that, and thank you and welcome on board. Chair McAllister, thanks for covering the points that I was going to make and allowing me to really extol the presence of Kate in our community. Thank you.
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Kate, I really appreciate you updating this, given that it's been 2 years since we've seen an update. So thank you very much for making us. And I have just a couple of questions. And one is, we are also in the process of, there's an RFP out for the next strategic plan. So I guess I'm wondering, as we look at this, if we're correlating what we have done in the past with what we might be looking for in the next strategic plan, with an eye towards, are there other things that could be in this matrix or should be in this matrix, just kind of figuring out where we are with that. And then this second piece, sort of a related question, as the city and the county are working on the next round of the TAC report, and possibly Springfield might participate in some of that work in a new way. Your notes reference that other work as sort of we're not. It's sort of, this has become kind of a hybrid, or does it need to be a hybrid between what the county is doing and its sort of continuum of care, sort of poverty and homelessness board specific lens, versus what we're actually broadly doing as a community to address housing and homelessness. And this is a little bit of an uncomfortable hybrid. Like, it doesn't quite tell the whole story, but it tells, with your updates, tells a little more of the story than it used to. So I guess I'm seeking clarity. And since we're embarking on a new strategic plan, thinking, well, okay, maybe we need to be looking at this with an eye towards, do we need to adjust this matrix in some way?
Great question, Mayor Venice. And I think you astutely touched on what many people likely are asking themselves as to what's next. And as I mentioned, this plan did officially end in 2021. It will help guide us in this current year until we have a new plan. I want to be clear that as far as the county goes, we don't have an RFP out today for a strategic plan. And while we hope to at some point, I know that any creation of any plan needs to have an agreed upon process. And we want to make sure that the PHB and its members and others who you might recommend have an opportunity to weigh in both on the process as well as kind of what we do after the responses to the RFP comes in, if that's the direction that things go. Based on conversations that I've had in the community, there's also an interest in, I've heard the term regionalizing the plan as much as possible. And so is there an opportunity for the cities, the county, other key partners in our community, folks with lived experience of homelessness to agree upon kind of one regional focus plan? I certainly do not know the answer to that, and would say that it is something to look at so that we do have clear steps moving forward that we have all agreed to. And so there's many more conversations that need to happen. But even myself and Chair McAllister had a conversation today just about informing this group of where we are, which is simply that we want to talk about process at this point and hope to at the next PHB meeting so that we can begin this creation of creating a plan.
Okay, that's helpful. It's just that we know that the county works on some specific things. On some things, the city partners, and there are some things that the city works on independently. And so just sort of understanding that whole landscape, and maybe there's a way in this to sort of make that clear.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
That makes sense. And
well, go ahead and respond, Kate.
I appreciate that, Mayor Vinnis. And I think that partner column that even this plan has, but can be more explicit, is a key piece of any strong plan of, who is going to help move a particular item forward or goal forward. And that it likely would not be, the county that is moving all of those goals forward, in that, the capacity or the funding doesn't exist just within the county.
Chris, I can't remember, was
Brittany, you are up, and then
Okay.
Mayor Van Gordon.
awesome. I feel like I've talked to enough of you that you probably know where my opinion is on this, but I totally agree with where the mayor and Kate are going with this, and that is like talking about what we're doing next. I feel like, coming from the perspective of the public, I think that these plans that we've had are wonderful and directive towards staff or the individuals who are working in the plan. What it's missing is the strategic sort of oversight and presentation that allows the public to feel confident in what it is we're doing. And so, as much as that might be, we have all the pieces for it, but we just need to put it together in a way that the public can have more confidence that we're all working together. We're all on the same page. Yes, the city plays a specific role. Yes, the county plays this specific role. In my perfect world, here's the role the business community could play. Here's the role that our service providers could play. And we have a presentation that's easy for everyone to say, this is our one plan. Oh, and then by the way, let me pull out this piece that's specific to the city, and I'll pull out this piece that's specific to the, the business community, et cetera. So I love that, the direction that we go. So we don't have, when someone says, what's the plan to solve homelessness? Oh, and someone hands them the TAC report, and then someone else hands them the Poverty and Homelessness Board plan. And then someone else says, well, the city has the CSI thing. And then the next person said, where's Springfield at, right? Like, we all know we're doing things on this. So getting it in one spot, I think, is as important as anything else. My question about this like last plan, and maybe it's backwards thinking, so it doesn't actually matter as much, but I see the 2 goals here, and maybe you touch on this and I miss it, Kate, but there was a 3rd goal in the plan around public communication and I had it pulled up here, increase public understanding. And I'm just curious, was that not included in this matrix because there weren't like the measurable pieces pulled out on it, or did it at some point that get kind of edited out? I was just kind of curious about that component that isn't touched on in the matrix you just presented.
Brittany, that's a great question. I'd love to dig a little and see, honestly, if I missed a piece of previous document, or it may have been that there weren't things to report out on a regular basis, but I can get back to you.
So the document that you updated and presented is what's showing online as the living document, but it just doesn't include the pieces in the full plan around that 3rd goal. So I was just curious about that because I'm particularly interested in like the public education and informing the public, and that was where that 3rd goal lived. And I just didn't know if there was a formality that it got left off at some point intentionally, or if there is some updates. So appreciate you looking into it a little bit more, because just out of my own curiosity, again, I want to focus on the going forward, but the 3rd point about advocating and public awareness is interesting to me.
Thank you, Brittany, on that. And your point is also received. We have mentioned that part of the matrix has been missing on the website for a little bit. So with that in mind, we will continue to try and strive for full accountability and public education on where we're at. The advocacy and legislative policy portion says that part 3 of our big picture strategic plan, and that's the one where we've had more of a reliance on the city and county institutions. And we have talked about this last year, reinforming and reintegrating into that. And so I think that there will be certainly better matrix and qualifiable deliverables as the conversation continues. So Mayor Van Gordon.
Thank you. I think Brittany's got some great points. And like, I think, you know, how we communicate and wrap up a cohesive story here to talk to the public about is really, really critically important. And I know we're at the start of this, and we're on the plan to get a plan stage. And that's always, you know, the fun part. I just wanted to, I guess, really reiterate the importance of finding the right tone and flexibility for this next stage. And I know we'll get there, and I know we've gone through a ton of iterations, but sometimes when we go through the policy pieces of this, it's really hard to make sure all the moving parts are rowing in the same direction. And a good plan is going to help us make sure we do that, and how we communicate to the public that we're rowing in the same direction. And I think a good plan is able to do that. And I find myself, and I sit through all of these meetings, really when we get into funding and programming, really struggling to tie that back to what our strategic plan is sometimes, because we get so atomically detailed that sometimes we just lose sight where the finish line is. And I know it is iteration, it is practice, right? We will get there, but I just want, like, what I'm looking forward to in this next plan is really being able to find and get the right strategic vision out to the community, even though we could have a billion tactical steps. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Van Gordon, Mayor Venus, Commissioner Farr for sharing, and Brittany Cook-Warner. Matthias, is there anything that you'd like to speak on this matter before I speak? Just want to make sure I give the full committee a round. Okay, so Matthias is good. So I have a proposal to consider, given that we're a little bit off of our schedule due to the fires and that lovely thing we call COVID. That has set us back 2 years on almost everything we care about, but we've still been able to build and make the most out of it. We've been able to secure a site for our mass shelter that is referenced in the strategic plan. We've been able to take and address youth issues by finding strategic funding, thanks to Amanda Borda and Alex Dreer and the rest of that team. So this is a living document. And so one of the things I'd like to consider is we are already in 2022 when we had a strategic plan from 2016 to 2021. we have a matrix that we have to understand a little bit, and we need to really coalesce where things are. So as we move forward, knowing that we want to do a robust community engagement, knowing that we want to dig deep, I was wondering about this body's thoughts about an interim strategic plan that is just cleaning up the back end of the 2016 document while giving staff the room to do the full engaging portion of a 2023 to 2028 type plan. So these are the thoughts, so that we don't lose sight of where we're at. We don't lose momentum, but we also grade where are we at with these other things. Do we need to shore up 3.1, 3.2, and 3.2C in regards to engaging the community, engaging local government, and participating in the local and state advocacy components? This is my thoughts. If we did that and we had a strategic planning committee, again, it stopped in 2018, and that's when we made the matrix, and we kind of left it at that. What if we had the chairs or an appointed person from each of our current existing groups be part of that process as we look through 5 years in review and see what we need to do, and then have Kate and her team participate with that to help figure out if we need a consultant or somebody to help steward those into a meaningful plan that has community buy-in, that has lived experience buy-in, and has provider consideration. Because we can build anything, but if we don't have the staff to do it, if we don't have the community buy-in, then it's not here. And so that's my proposal. I would like to kick it out to this committee and see what we think. Are there any comments or thoughts? Seeing none. We need to do something, and we need to be able to restore community trust. And so one of the ways we can start is to honor what we're trying to do. Did it look like you were going to say something, Commissioner Farr? I do see Mayor Venice's hand went up too.
And I just physically raised my hand, Chris, and I was waiting for other people to weigh in, and I'll wait with bated breath for Mayor Venice. But I would agree with the statement that you made regarding continuing the plan in the interim, but forming a small, perhaps an ad hoc group to work more directly on what is the process for the next plan, including an RFP. Mayor Venice, sorry.
Well, no, actually, I was happy to hear what you had to say first. I agree. I think, Chris, you're right that if the RFP hasn't gone out yet, we did do the work on that. I don't know that we have to revisit the RFP process at all, but that sounds like that's going to be I don't know what the timeline would be for that RFP to go out, and then for us to actually identify a consultant, and then for that consultant to do work. So I agree with you that some short-term goals would be good, and some consolidation of what is it that we need to track in this strategic plan, and how do we do that? So I support your suggestion of a smaller work group to at least help us kind of stay on track and remind us of what those goals are, and that conversation could help other conversations around how we tie all these pieces together. The TAC report, I mean, there are just so many pieces, and each one has its own narrow lens. So yeah, I'm in support of that kind of, at least some transitional document that we agree to.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Brittany.
I agree. I think it would be good. I would love to see whether I just saw Commissioner Trieger volunteer. And I don't know, Mayor Venice, if that was a volunteer from you or just to yes, I nod that that's a good idea. But I guess I would love if we were able in that conversation to maybe discuss how the TAC 2.0 sort of idea gets molded into this whole thing. So we're not simultaneously having a conversation with elected officials about doing a TAC 2.0. So if there's a way to tie elected officials into that committee, maybe there's a handful of us that got to sit down and sort of say okay, here's all the plans. Now let's maybe think through what this could look like. That would be super beneficial in my mind. Again, I feel because that conversation happened in the public eye with our joint elected official body about a month ago, there seemed to be enthusiasm from that body to say, we want to do something with the TAC 2.0. I feel like it's the perfect time to discuss how those things end up coming together. So I like the idea.
Thank you, Brittany. Mayor Van Gordon, do you want to weigh in? Nope.
No, like, yeah, I think this is a good idea. I mean, I don't think there's anything else to add.
Thank you. Call it Project Alps. We need all lane participation strategies. So I appreciate the thoughts and the processes behind here. And so with that in mind, I'd like to entertain a motion to form a strategic planning group of the PHB members to try and help set up an interim strategy for the strategic planning of 2023 with the advisement of Kate and staffing as she determines. But is that a viable motion? Yes, Chair, Vice Chair Farr.
Chair, I'm prepared to craft a motion.
Yes, sir.
I move that the Poverty and Homelessness Board establish an ad hoc committee, which will be small in size, swift in nature, and have a short sunset date to provide feedback to the Poverty and Homelessness Board regarding the ongoing work toward creating the next version of the strategic plan.
I appreciate that motion. Can we get a second for said motion?
I'll second that. Brittany.
We have a second by Brittany, motion by Commissioner Farr. Any more discussion on this? Seeing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, signify by saying nay. Hearing none, motion carries. Sounds like we got some work to do, folks. Thank you very, very much. And let's coordinate with Kate about timelines and participation and things of that nature. Thank you very much, Commissioner.
And Chair, if I may just mention what I meant by ad hoc is if you look up the term ad hoc, it means for this single purpose only.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for that clarification and that understanding. Now let's move on to our next agenda item. Let's see here. We have Amanda with the Youth Coordination Committee Plan.
Chair McAllister, if I may, how would you like for potential members of the ad hoc committee to indicate their interest? Is it that they would just email me?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that the usual occurrence? Okay.
Sometimes it's the chair of a committee or like the staff who go and help sort it all. If anybody would like to know more or to indicate interest, please reach out to Kate Budd or myself, and we will pass that information forward and release times and dates and stuff for these items as we develop them. Is that okay with you, Kate?
Yes,
okay.
Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Now on to Amanda for the youth plan.
Thanks, Chris. I'm going to give just a hopefully brief update on where we are with our Youth Homelessness Demonstration Program, or YHDP, efforts. And Jenna Ely is also here. I'd like to introduce, I think she is here. I'd like to introduce Jenna, who is our current staff on the YHDP efforts, but Jenna just started last week. And so I'll have Jenna introduce herself once I get to that point too. But I'm going to just give a quick update and Jenna can jump in whenever she wants to. So just to give a quick overview and a reminder in case folks weren't at the meeting where we announced this, but we, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, our HUD, selected our Lane County COC to participate as a YHDP community. And with that, we were allocated a total amount of about $3.5 million. Lane County COC is one of about 33 communities that were selected out of that round for funding from, and that was 2 rounds of funding, fiscal year 19 and 20 combined for that competition. That was the 3rd time we applied. So we weren't selected in the first 2 opportunities, but of course we tried again, and we were selected the 3rd time, which is very exciting. So that was announced, I believe in about September So you may have heard about it at that point. So that funding basically follows a COC program regulations generally, but also provides for some waivers and flexibilities to demonstrate new and promising practices to address youth homelessness. So like I mentioned, Lane County Human Services Division is really leading that YHCP effort, but of course we're not doing that alone. We have several other folks involved. So as I mentioned, our staffing has kind of changed internally. You might remember that Alex Dreer was previously sort of holding the youth work that we were doing in the division. She's since moved on to another position within the county. So I've been holding it temporarily for the moment, but I'm passing that on to Jenna, who is working as extra help in our division while we post a permanent position to support the work around youth homelessness in the Human Services Division. So bear with us as our staffing sort of fluctuates around this work, but hopefully we will have that be more consistent going forward. But in addition to that, we've been really collaborating with our Youth Homelessness Solutions work group of the PHB, you're familiar with, and what we're calling sort of a core team, which has representatives from all of these different groups, and is really sort of our kind of executive group that's really focused on leading the effort. And that also includes folks from our 15th Night Youth Action Council, who has been our youth advisory board in the past. And we've also brought in the Looking Glass Play Group, which is their youth action group out of that agency. So we have some great young leaders out of those groups. And then we also have, so as a selected community, we are assigned technical assistance from HUD to sort of help us move forward the work and make sure that we stay on track with what we need to complete as a selected community. So we have been assigned CSH as our technical assistance providers. So that's Hannah Roberts and Monique Jackson. They've been great and a big help to us. We also have specific technical assistance for youth collaboration and really building youth leaders in our community as part of this process. And that's through True Colors United, Dee Ballier. And then we have additional opportunities for more technical assistance. So the young leaders in our group applied for additional special technical assistance around kind of the education aspects of the work, and that's provided by the National Center for Homeless Education. Megan Johnson is our TA provider on that. So we have a whole big group of TA providers on our side helping us through the work and keeping us moving forward. And of course, we have additional community stakeholders who are involved as well. So on the youth engagement piece is really critical to all of this work. Young people are involved in all aspects of our planning thus far and are actually required to be involved in all aspects and in all decision making. So that's been really key as we move forward. And again, the leaders that we have are really from 15th Night Youth Action Council and Looking Glasses Play Group. And they've sort of formed what were, I put in quotes, an executive team of really specific leaders out of each of those groups who are going to represent fully in all of the meetings. We know that all of the youth can participate in every meeting and really fully commit to the time commitment. So there's a few folks who are really representing those groups and moving that work forward on behalf of them. And they're still figuring out what they want to call themselves. They've been called a super group, an executive team. So we'll figure out what we're going to call them. But that's sort of the group that is going to be represented at all of our planning meetings. We are providing youth stipends for participation in this effort at a rate of, I think it's $20 an hour through those other groups, but now that we'll have a planning grant, we will be providing stipends of $25 an hour for their participation in those meetings. So that was another critical piece that we wanted to make sure we incorporated. And again, we have that TA in developing youth leaders from True Colors United. Just a reminder on sort of where we are with timeline. So again, we were awarded in September and we immediately begin in the planning phase. And right now where we are is really around developing our coordinated community plan, which I can explain a little bit about what that entails, but that's really where we are right now. That's the first step. We have to complete that and submit that to HUD and be approved in order to access our funding. We've also been able to apply for that planning grant so that we can staff this and provide for those youth stipends. So we were able to complete that. And that was about 154,000, I want to say, so that we can support the work in the planning phase. So that coordinated community plan is due to HUD in March. And essentially once that's approved, we can start procuring and developing the actual projects that will implement the work. So that is probably going to happen between April and June. And then projects will begin implementation around July through September, and all the funds have to be obligated by HUD by September. So those projects are then renewable through the COC program after the YHDP program ends. So as we go along after that, we'll be kind of continuously evaluating and implementing that coordinated community plan. So when I say coordinated community plan, what that really means is what are we going to do with this funding and how are we going to move the work of addressing youth homelessness forward? So that includes a statement of need and a whole bunch of data that we're going to kind of demonstrate what the quantitative need is around youth homelessness, as well as some qualitative data around needs and vulnerabilities of youth. It includes stakeholders and what their roles are in this work, a mission and vision for how we see this moving forward, and then our governance structure, so who's going to be involved and who's making decisions around this. And then we have to kind of list out our new projects, and that doesn't mean specific agencies, but it means these are the types of projects and interventions that we want to use in order to address youth homelessness. And that can include some of the flexibilities that HUD has allowed for, and some of the different sort of waivers that they've put forward under this program. And then of course we have to have it signed by a variety of people, including this body as the COC board. So to break down sort of how we see the PHB being involved in this, well, you guys will have to approve our coordinated community plan. So as I said, that is due in March. And I think our PHB regular meetings falls after that date. So I think we anticipate at this point we'll need a small extension from HUD to make sure that the timeline aligns, and they've put out that option. So they've just said, if you need an extension, just let us know. So I think we will probably do that so that we have more time and can fully utilize the 6 months we have to make the plan, and then have this group approve that hopefully at the March meeting. And that will include an approval of the governance structure that we've developed and sort of how that decision-making will happen. And then of course, the PHB is involved in just supporting the overall effort as the COC board. We anticipate this will be an ongoing work as a selected community. So it's not just kind of happening within this vacuum, but this really has to fold into, like we just talked about with our strategic planning, we want to make sure that this coordinated community plan folds into that and is a part of our overall plan around homelessness. And then as we move forward, of course, the funding is renewable, and it's flexible, but HUD flexible. So it's not, you can spend money on anything, but it allows for some level of flexibility around small things. But of course, there's going to be things where we need some additional resource allocation down the road, I'm sure. So those are all ways that the PHB can be involved. And of course, if you're extraordinarily interested, you can be directly involved in some of our planning meetings as well. So I wanted to also give an update on our community convenings. You've probably received an email, hopefully, about these as an invitation. So we have a couple of these coming up, one of which is Friday and Saturday this week, and another tentatively scheduled for February 5th and 6th. Those are happening virtually through Zoom, and they're going to be facilitated by our TA providers. What we're going to do is really give an update on more detail in terms of our planning process so far in that coordinated community plan and where we are with those different aspects. But we're also going to be developing some of the content and building community involvement in that process. And we're primarily focusing on the system modeling piece and figuring out what projects and interventions that we want to implement to address youth homelessness. So if that's something you're interested, I've sent that out, and we can always put that registration link in the chat again if you didn't get it. But those are 2 full days. I know it's a big time commitment, but if you can attend for part of that, that's okay too. We do want as many folks to attend for as much of it as possible, just so we have a consistent group. It's going to be a lot of activities and breakout groups. But if you can attend or you're interested in a specific part, feel free to join for part of that as well. Let's see. think that's it. So I just wanted to hand it over and see if Jenna had anything to add that I've missed. And if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Amanda. I think you covered just about everything. There's nothing else I would add unless folks have other questions. But just to introduce myself, my name is Jenna. I previously may have worked with some of you in different spheres, including 15th Night Work or Connected Lane County. So I have worked with youth for about almost 7 years now. And so I'm super excited to step in this position and help continue forward with the plan for building out a YHDP community coordinated plan. Thanks, Amanda.
So if there are questions.
Thank you, staff, for this participation. I see that Mayor Van Gordon has his hand raised.
Thanks, Chris. Really great presentation. I thought it was really informative. I'm a big fan of the stipends, especially around this type of work, because I think it's important to engage folks at the right level. Are you giving them? Are you adding additional sort of support to make sure everybody understands what's going to happen from a tax perspective, and to make sure we're sort of squared away from that, nobody gets surprised when this extra money gets distributed for the work?
Yeah, I might pass that question over to Jenna. She's been really handling the processing of those stipends. Right now, they're going through our Lane County process, but we've tried to figure out better ways to do that is more youth-friendly, like gift cards and other things. So Jenna, I don't know if you can speak to what's been explained as far as that is income.
Yeah, I can pop in. So all youth, in order to have the understanding that they could receive stipends through the county, all filled out W-9 forms. And so as one of the facilitators for the 15th Night Youth Action Council, I worked alongside Johnny Green, who is facilitating the Looking Glass Play Committee. And so we've walked a lot of those youth through that process of how do you even apply or like fill these documents out? And then 2, what do they mean? And then how do they incorporate later into tax season, all that sort of stuff. So there's more individualized support on the ground from folks who, myself and Johnny, who are more interconnected with youth daily or weekly. And so, yeah, that support is existing.
Oh, great. Thank you very much.
I'm very excited by this work. And at some point, I'd like to talk to you directly about the stipends, as we talked about giving stipends to folks for league. And we ran into some barriers due to people with lacking documentation or lacking in bank accounts and things like that, or not having stable mailing places for things like tax forms. So I'd be really curious about how we do this when with a more targeted youth focus. So, but thank you very much on this. Is there needing to be an action for staff to proceed on anything?
No, thanks. And I think, yeah, we can definitely revisit the conversation with league and stipends as well. I don't think there's any action today, just sort of things to keep on the radar as far as we will be bringing the coordinated community plan in a detailed form, hopefully by the March meeting. So we'll make sure to send that out in advance, but we'll be looking for approval of that in our governance structure coming up soon. So this is sort of a heads up that that's coming. And then just if you want to be involved in a more detailed way or really participate in the meetings, you can, feel free to reach out to either me or Jenna. And I don't think there's anything else. And I'll just give a shout out also. Matthias has been really actively involved and is on our core team as well. So he can feel free to fill you in too on any other details.
Excellent. Well, I really appreciate this presentation. Due to the time-sensitive items, I'd like to move my piece to the next meeting or the next next executive meeting, and allow the remainder of time before public comment to go to Commissioner Farr for his advocacy piece.
Thanks, Chris. And I was going to offer the same for my advocacy piece. There's not much to report. All that I'm going to really talk about is really the, hang on a second, I'm bringing it up. 2018, which is, there we go. The legislative concept, 218, that is out right now. A lot of us have heard about it, and it is a pilot program, presuming it gets through the short session of the legislature, to facilitate the cities and counties working together on homelessness office issues. So it appropriates money for coordinating a homeless response system, which is not unlike what you see currently occurring in Multnomah County between the city of Portland and Multnomah County, where there is a office of homelessness that actually does some of the things that we talked about earlier in this meeting, coordinates the response and the planning between cities and counties. It is a legislative concept at this point in time, in which a small handful, I believe it's 8 communities, will receive funding from the legislature to work on the pilot. If the pilots work, then we can see it roll. We potentially will see it rolled out to more communities, into more counties. At this point in time, earlier I reported that Lane County was going to be one of the pilots. We're not. Lane County is not in the pilot program, so we'll be watching this from a distance to see how it works to coordinate the efforts between cities and counties. Not unlike the discussion that we had earlier today, I anticipate that it's going to be a way to help facilitate more closer planning and strategy between cities and counties. So very briefly, it would establish a coordinated homeless response office with an advisory board representing the governments of each member agency or member government in the pilot program. We more or less have such a board already, and that is this board right now. But as we talked about earlier, we've not coordinated very well yet what our strategic planning is between the cities and the county. So really, that's all I have to offer on HB2 or LC, Legislative Concept 218. We'll be monitoring it at Association of Oregon Counties to see how it goes forward in the legislature. And Chris, that is all I have on the legislative issues that are moving forward right now.
Well, thank you, Commissioner. One part of what I would like to shore up is, as you mentioned earlier, that there is a media perspective about what is and isn't happening. And so I would like to have us both look at what's happening in the state as well as report back about what we're doing here, so we can speak to those kind of problematic titles in the media about what is and isn't happening. And so these pilot projects and the efforts of this body to try and really just, as Brittany said, educate the public about what's truly happening, we will be able to get ahead of things. And so thank you very much for following this bill. And if anything progresses, or this concept, and should it hatch as a bill and go into the process, I'm going to lean on your expertise, having been in that process, to let us know what we need to do.
Thanks, Chris. It's been supported by the Association of Oregon Counties, and it's Jason Kropp, who is from Central Oregon, is the writer of the legislative concept. In speaking to him, we have pretty good optimism that this will move forward.
Awesome, sir. Well, thank you very much for that. I would like to give a quick heads up in regards to the item that I was going to be talking about. We, by our charter, are expected to be part of the Community Action Agency and part of the community continuum of care. And so we have duties and expectations and concepts that we can do or should do or need to consider. And so as we look forward towards our future as a community, we are going to be trying to engage and explore what is the PHB's role, what is the community need, and how can we be either more inclusive or be able to share space with groups that can do what we are being asked to do in that capacity. And so I don't want to do this in the last 3 minutes before we open up public comment, but I would like to have the deeper dives with the smaller group to go over concepts so we can look at doing a big picture presentation in April. So if this doesn't happen to make a work group between now and February, I want to make sure that we put this on the March agenda so we can make sure that we're not short-terming it for April. And so with that in mind, if there's any more information that we want to learn about that or talk about that, please reach out to myself or Kate as we explore these. I would like to open up a request for public comment. We have about 10 minutes left in this meeting. I know that one person, Catherine Ryan, has stated an interest to say something. So if there's not any other further items from staff that we need to address, I'd like to open up public comment. Okay, seeing head shakes. Catherine Ryan, you have 3 minutes.
Okay, awesome. I just wanted, I'm kind of trying to get this out through as many channels as possible. We've been learning that the Assurance Wireless service through the state Lifeline phone program is going to be ending at the end of March. They are one of a few different service providers for that service. But the sense is that there are a number of folks who have the service through that provider. And so I have some kind of information written up about sort of what individuals need to do if they are currently an Assurance Wireless customer through that Lifeline program through the state. It's also sometimes referred to as the Obama phone. So if anybody has any questions, I think I'm talking with James, he's going to send it out through the outreach folks. So I just want to try and get it out there so that we don't end up in a situation where folks who are either unsheltered or who have high medical needs or anything like that end up with their phones getting cut off without knowing that that is happening. So there are other options. It takes a little bit of time to transition to one of the other services, which is part of why we're kind of trying to push out the information now. So I will put my email in the chat, and folks are welcome to follow up with me if they want more details or sort of something that is a little easier to just pass on directly to other folks. Thanks.
Excellent, Catherine. Thank you very much for that. And I know that's a very necessary resource. We know that those phones being put in the hands of many of our people has allowed to completed FDAs, to coordinated medications and establishment of care so that limbs and lives are saved. And so these are very vital. And I think Lifeline is an appropriate backdrop for these phones. I do know that sometimes providers, at least with the Assurance connections, were able to get a nominal payback of $6 to register folks. And so there's an incentive for people to try and take the time to work with these types of processes and help our people get connected. So if people are worried about staff time or considerations helping sign people up, please look into it further. Are there, Richard Self had asked regarding the COC/CAP conversation, and just to address that openly, this is about how do we look at our charter and see what we are involved in and what we can do. This is not to replace or subvert or otherwise replace anything currently in motion. This is just educational, trying to understanding and mapping out item. So as far as I'm understanding, when it was presented to me, this is not to correct anything currently in motion, Richard. So are there any agenda items for February that we would like to bring forward from this executive meeting? Staff, are there anything coming up in February that
Chris?
we want to be? Yes, ma'am.
I'm just going to put my pitch in one more time for some briefing from Lane County Behavioral Health around mental health services and planning around that. And I mentioned it before, and I know it's in the works somewhere, but I don't know how soon it might come to us.
That's a great thing, Madam Mayor. And I would like to say that the two items that I am bringing forward to the next meeting, the general meeting, is the fiscal overlay and a mental health update, knowing that we need to do this in order to make sure that those safe sleeping sites are safe and people are sleeping. Great. So are there any other items, Steve?
Yes, I think next month we can send out the report from the Legislative Task Force on House Bill 2100, the Task Force on Homelessness and Racial Disparities. And we can have some more discussion of that and what that means potentially to how we will receive funding in the future.
Thank you, Steve. As a final note on this meeting, I really want to raise awareness that it's through synergy that we can keep our energy going. We have folks who are being held up from their progresses because there's missing opportunities, because people are still fearful of COVID, as rightly so, but offices are still closed, lines are still long, and depression is setting in, especially when people have been asked to move from the place where they've been for a month or two or more as they try and figure out what's next. And as we build together as a community, as we try and find what is the community option, what is the answer for everybody, that we don't lose sight of those who are the hardest to help, those who don't have options in our approach, the folks who are not going to be able to qualify for the systems as we have them laid out. We need to make sure that until we get those options, that we keep them alive, that we keep them with limb and try and keep liberty as much as possible. So I ask, as we go forward into February, knowing this is the first month, that we set a pace that honors that dignity and that honors the staff and the electeds who are building the opportunity to make this happen, and the providers who will follow through and be the follow-up when things don't work out as planned. So we will do this and we will continue to grow. And I'm very honored to serve with all of you. On that note, I ask that you have a great rest of your month and be well and be warm. Meeting adjourned.